welcome to the Immigrant Podcast. My name is Martin, and I am the host of the Immigrant Podcast. Today, Steve, you are going to walk us through what it looks like to be raised in a household where your parents are immigrants.
Yeah, sounds great, Martin. Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Very good. So, your dad is from Cuba, right?
That's right. My dad was born in Cuba, and he immigrated to the United States when he was about 12 or 13 years old.
Okay. And how did the story of how your dad migrated from Cuba to the US impact you growing up?
Yeah, so it definitely created a lot of sort of lore in my family. Like a lot of Cubans, my dad's family immigrated after the Cuban Revolution and when Fidel Castro took over. So they lived in sort of the middle of the island, and their farm was seized by the government and turned into government property. Because a lot of private assets were seized by the government after the revolution. So at that point, my dad's family decided to leave. They went to Mexico first for about a year. Then they crossed the border, similar to what a lot of Mexicans do. Big difference with Cuban immigrants, of course, is that they get political asylum right off the bat. Very lucky Latin Americans that get political asylum and a path to citizenship right off the bat.
Right.
That policy has been changed a little bit recently, off and on, but generally speaking, they had a much easier path to citizenship. So they went to Miami, like a lot of Cubans do, and from there went to Tarrytown, New York, where one of my great aunts had already got set up. At the time, there was a General Motors factory in Tarrytown, which is no longer there, but that brought in a lot of immigrants at the time to work there. And I was then, born, 20, 30 years later, and in Tarrytown, and that's where I grew up. I grew up in a big Cuban family, extended family. I think at one point in Tarrytown, there was 9 or 10 houses that were extended family, aunts, uncles, cousins, my grandparents. So
That's fantastic.
yeah, there was a big Cuban population in Tarrytown. Not so much today. There's still a little bit of a lingering effect there. But, our family was just like, we're talking about a town of 15,000 people, small town on the Hudson River, suburbs of New York City. But yeah, we had 9, 10 houses. So we had lots of family, lots of big parties. And so, yeah, to answer your question, definitely how it affected me. I think, a lot of gratitude for the opportunities that the United States creates for immigrants. I think it's, the U.S. is a place that, if you're willing to put in the work, you can really, advance yourself and get further in life than you could in a lot of other places. And so, the internet, I think, has changed that a little bit, but that definitely was the case, when my dad and his parents immigrated here. And, a big emphasis on family values. A lot of, like I mentioned, we just had a lot of big family parties growing up, a lot of emphasis on family and kind of always having each other's backs, which I think in immigrant communities is really, really important, because when you're going to a new place, you don't speak the language, you don't necessarily have the same opportunities as other people have, family being able to support each other, to, cook meals for each other, to give each other jobs, give each other work, give each other a place to stay or a couch to crash on if things aren't working out, is so critical.
Yes.
So that shaped a lot of, my experience growing up.
What did that look like for you when you transitioned from middle school, high school, and into college?
For me, I went to a Catholic middle school, sort of in the next town over. It was really, really small Catholic school that, when I graduated 8th grade with a total class of 9 kids. The 8th grade class at that school, 2 years after I graduated, was 2 kids. And I think a year after that, the school shut down. So I grew up in I went to a really small Catholic school growing up, but really excellent teachers that really set me up for really the rest of my academic life.
Mhm.
From there, I got into a high school called Regis High School in New York City, which is pretty competitive to get into. It's also Catholic. It's a Jesuit high school, and they have a pretty tough admissions process. And I think, I was a little bit surprised to get in, and I think my parents were very surprised I got in. And I think for them, that was sort of the first time, at least what they've told me, that they kind of realized, like, I guess, how smart I was, and not to sound too conceited or anything like that. I think that's what they expressed to me that, I didn't realize that you were that smart. And so, Regis was a very positive experience. Really academically, just like very challenging. I had an hour and a half commute, to school and back. So, having to be there at 8 a.m, if not earlier, and then leaving school after like basketball or volleyball practice and getting home at 6:37 and still having 3 hours of homework to do. It's a lot when you're 15, 16, 17 years old.
But how did that rigorous schedule of such a tough high school life develop your character, and has that translated into who you are when it comes to business today?
Yeah, I think it definitely sort of increased my tolerance for sort of pain, I guess, in a way. Like, I am able to kind of take on a lot of work. I have two businesses, two kids. Like I think my bandwidth and I think Regis really improved my bandwidth for the amount of like just straight up work that I can process and get through. And at the same time being thoughtful about it. So I really appreciate, like, you've heard a lot of stories of, Regis grads that go to medical school and they still look back on their junior year at Regis and say, well, that was the hardest academic year of my life. Even though I'm in medical school. Right. So I think, you kind of move kind of like your sort of expectations. It really made college a breeze, in a lot of ways. So yeah, I think, that really helped in terms of like, just again, going through such a challenging academic environment really made things afterwards seem a bit easier.
Okay. Well, so they say in America, when you put in a little bit of hard work, you're bound to get rewarded for it. And it looks like you've done that in the past several years. There's something you said about immigrants and the internet changing the playing ground. So, from what I understand, it looks like the internet has changed how immigrants benefit in terms of what you specifically may be, and correct me if I'm wrong, trying to get to is the fact that now we have virtual assistants or VAs that can work from other countries, and they've basically taken jobs that were taken by immigrants across the globe. Um, how do you think that is going to change in the coming future as AI continues to develop, grow, and come into the marketplace?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a really good question. I think, we'll see where sort of AI nets out. I think, like I mentioned earlier, I think the trend of the internet, like, we in the United States, even today, I think actually, especially today with baby boomers retiring, have a really big demand for labor.
Yes.
And I think immigrants typically, when they come to this country, like take on that demand for labor.
Yes.
I think, for example, a lot of people, like my dad's first job was in the cleaning business. So he was, just basically, essentially a janitor, working for another Cuban guy who was an extended family member. And his business, ultimately, my dad was, started his own cleaning company, which ended up being really successful. And so I think, from the AI perspective, I think what we're seeing with AI so far is that it's eating up knowledge work. I think, we are seeing a lot of white collar jobs being disrupted by AI, which is not really what we're used to having seen in the past 20 years. Typically, it's more blue collar jobs that were disrupted by robotics or automation. And now we're seeing like the professional class getting affected by it. You think, copywriters, designers, coders, lawyers, people that are producing knowledge work are now having their jobs disrupted. And I think as far as the internet, when my dad immigrated here and there was a demand for physical labor, there's no way to satisfy that without hiring real people to do that. But now, since there is a lot of knowledge work via the internet, you don't necessarily have to move to a country to get work there, right? Like you
Yes.
said, like I can hire someone, and I have hired people from all over the world to do specific tasks for me in my marketing agency, or GivePact, our crypto fundraising platform, um, that don't live in the United States. And I don't need to have someone living here in order to do that. So I think, it's definitely like this very interesting interplay between sort of physical labor and disruption of that, sort of immigrants and sort of them thinking about the trade-offs of moving here versus not, and their access to opportunities, because they can probably access a lot of the same work opportunities living abroad as they can living in the United States, but maybe there's like a standard or quality of living or something else or safety or something else that they're looking for, when they decide to move countries.
Yes, I mean we've seen after COVID, we've seen a lot of people that moved from the work environment of the office and moved back home, but some of them even migrated to other countries just to reduce their cost of living and enjoy a certain kind of lifestyle. That's okay, but based on what you just said, if you are speaking to immigrant parents, and we know how much they're tasked, especially in the US, and they're pulled in different kind of directions to work and give their children little attention, and you're having to give them a little advice on how they can start preparing their children for the future. What would you say? What do they need to focus when it comes to education and also developing their kids on extracurricular curricular activities?
In the United States specifically,
Yes.
I would say, it's like sort of one step at a time. I think, going to a good high school will kind of set you up for a good college experience, which will kind of set you up for a good career. I think one thing I think that's, I don't know if it's sort of like necessarily true across all immigrant groups, because I think it's interesting to think in the US about risk, and like how you choose to take risks in your career. Because I feel like on one hand, like I grew up in an environment where entrepreneurship was strongly encouraged. My parents are small business owners, and they really encouraged me and my brothers to sort of start our own businesses and make a living that way. Whereas I feel like there's some immigrant communities that don't like taking risks. They would rather focus on schooling and a stable career, because maybe they come from somewhere that stability is not really a strong element.
Yes.
So I think it sort of depends. I think my advice to like immigrants parents would be to be open-minded about sort of the path that your child chooses here. Like the United States, there's a lot of different ways to be successful. You can be successful taking risks and being entrepreneurial, and you can also be really successful crushing school and crushing a full-time career. There's no necessarily like right or wrong way. I think the United States, there's a lot of different paths that people can take and still kind of end up being successful, whatever that means for them.
So you said your family contributed a lot in helping you create and build that entrepreneurial spirit. How did that play into your creation of your digital marketing agency, Blue Wing?
Yeah, so after I graduated college, I worked full time for 3 different companies over the course of 5 or 6 years. Basically, during college, I got really into music. I worked at the commercial radio station locally, and I also started my own music blog. And that got me into a job at MTV right after graduating. From there, I went to work at The Fader, which is another music magazine, and then I worked at the Players Tribune, which was Derek Jeter's media startup. And after that, I have a distinct memory of attending my little brother's graduation at NYU when I was working, and I was telling my dad, like, yeah, I'm working like 12-hour days. And he said something that always stuck with me, is that, you're making someone else rich. And to me, like, even though I was working for like And at the time I was working for my childhood hero, Derek Jeter, like his startup, which was like to me like a dream. I still kind of realized like, I'm being underpaid and overworked, and I'm not making as much advance, or I'm not learning as much. I don't have a real mentor to really like push me forward. And at that point, I decided to take the risk of starting my own thing, kind of following through on my parents' advice to start my own business. I reduced my expenses. I moved home with my wife, my now wife, and we lived in my home in Tarrytown and commuted an hour and a half every day into the city. So we saved on rent, we saved the money. We packed lunches, we did the whole nine for a year to kind of put ourselves in a position that, we could both leave our full-time jobs and start consulting or start a business. And so we did that. And what was fascinating to me and really rewarding to me was that obviously when I started, I went from having a salary to nothing. But within a year or two, I was probably making 5 times more as a small business owner than I was at the full-time job. So it wasn't overnight, but and it took a lot of work and preparation to get there. And I was also in a very fortunate position to be able to live at home and have my parents cook dinner for me and all that. I wouldn't have been able to do that if I had to pay my rent for a year or two while I was building up my client base. Yeah. So I realized that, this is not all, self, as much as you like to say like a self-starter and all that. Like I didn't do it by myself. I had a lot of help. But ultimately, making those decisions ended up playing out for me. And so while my job isn't sort of as, I'll say as sexy as like working for Derek Jeter's media startup, like the rough and tumble grind of like just working with small business owners on like really boring businesses, ended up and owning my own work, and learning in my own things. And like, I learned so much that first year as a small business owner, like as an agency owner. Who became a HubSpot partner. I learned how to run paid advertising campaigns. I learned about marketing automation. I learned about CRMs. I learned about all this stuff that I had zero exposure to working in full-time roles. So I just learned a lot. I was working with a bunch of different small business owners, and ultimately ended up being much more lucrative than what I was doing before.
That's an interesting story. Now let's swing the pendulum on the other side, right? So most people say that, if you're starting a business or you're getting in some kind of enterprise, keep family out of it. So let me get to it. I have realized that businesses that have succeeded, most of them depend on family members to grow. So why is it that boring, old, new business ideas are supported by family members in terms they help you babysit your kids, they help you with cash if you have issues with cash flow, they come in and answer the phone for you? Why is it that we still end up saying that you still do not want to do business with family members, yet it seems like every business person I talk to, a family member did support them somewhere to become who they are today?
Yeah, I think it's a little bit different when it's like a family member supporting you in terms of starting your own business. I think, I've dabbled a little bit in my parents' business, but I've never worked for them really. My brothers have, and they do right now. So I would say like I had a lot of family support in starting my business, but they were not involved in my business and I was not involved with theirs. But I think they knew the kind of journey that I was on, and encouraged me to do things like live at home and save money in order to prepare myself for that journey. Because they had gone through it themselves when they were my age. I think as far as like the family business dynamic, like it's very complicated. I think, my parents have worked together. They started the business together. I think ultimately working together has made their marriage stronger. And like, a lot of my friends have divorced parents or separated parents. Like my parents have made it through it. And we're very lucky about that. My brothers both work for my parents, and it's not always easy. I think there's, especially when you get to a point where when you have like strong opinions, and you want to sort of respect your parents' opinion, but also like as a child of your parent in the business, like sort of make your own mark. That can get very complicated. And so I think it's really hard to sort of separate business stuff from personal stuff when you're in business with your family. So, but on the other end of the spectrum, there's a lot of benefits. There's a lot of trust. You can, I think it's easier to hold someone accountable who's a family member. If they screw up, I think there's obviously, like if they need help with something, you're kind of willing to step in and help them out. So I think there are also a lot of benefits
Yes.
to doing it. But yeah, my perspective is that it's not like good or bad. I think there's good parts about doing business with family and there's bad parts. It just kind of depends, and it does make it, I'd say, more complicated, and you have to be careful of how you manage your relationships.
Growing up in a family of immigrants, parents both are immigrants into the US from Cuba. Growing up in that kind of family, and they at some point get engaged in starting their own businesses, what are some of the lessons you started learning by observing and watching them? And how would those lessons benefit immigrant families or immigrant children, so second generation immigrants, who are looking to start their own businesses and still with their parents?
Yeah, I think, again, I think it starts with finding something that you'd like to do, that you're willing to kind of, I think what's interesting is that, like, with entrepreneurship, it's like, people, quit their full-time job to start a business in order to be financially free, but then they end up working twice as much in the business that they start, right? So it's kind of like this irony of like, I want financial freedom, so I'm going to like start a business, and then you end up working twice as much as you did before. And that's a difficult trap to get out of. And so I think what I've observed is, like, some of my big takeaways are, like, number one, you have to be ready to put in the work. When you're a small business owner, you're an entrepreneur, the buck stops with you. You're ultimately responsible for all of the outcomes. You can blame employees, like you can blame so-and-so about why a client is pissed off with you, but ultimately the client's going to put the responsibility on you. And the buck stops with you. So I think accountability, putting in a lot of work, and I think also, like, staying on top of stuff is really important. I think you can't really, on one hand, like, it's really nice to kind of think about delegating and scaling. But, my dad, for example, would wake up at like 4 a.m. every day, my whole childhood, to go out to a supermarket where his crew was just finishing up an overnight shift. And he would inspect, before the manager got there at 6 a.m., he would go through with the crew and make sure everything was done right. Typically, I don't think he would tell the crew that he was coming, so there's always that surprise element too.
Yes.
So I think, being present is, tied into sort of that hard work element. But I think that's definitely a lot of stuff that I observed growing up. I think, again, willingness to put in the work, accountability, and then, being present around the work that's being done, and not kind of like just assuming it's being taken care of and delegating. I think that's a lot of stuff that I learned about growing up.
So through your digital agency, when you're working with small businesses, do you find yourself sometimes falling back on the lessons learned in the past?
Yeah, I think so. I think ultimately, like, I always feel responsibility for my clients' performance. I do have a couple people on my team that, I delegate work to, and then they help me out a lot. But at the end of the day, 99% of the time, like, I make a point that I'm involved in the process. So I always need to want to be able to review and just generally stay up to speed on all of the work that we're doing, to make sure that I'm not missing anything, and that if a client calls me about something, that I'm educated on it. And I'm not just saying, well, so-and-so is handling it, so I don't have to worry about it. I do have to worry about it, because ultimately their work or lack thereof is going to affect me and my revenue and my my client's perception of Blue Wing and working with me. So yeah, definitely still resonates.
So the Innocence Project, can you tell us about your involvement with the Innocence Project and how digital strategies are employed to support their mission, especially in a context of an immigrant and rights of justice?
Yeah, so the Innocence Project was one of my first clients when I started Blue Wing. I think they're my first or second client 7 years ago. I still have a working relationship with them. They're an awesome organization that helps innocent people get out of prison using DNA testing. Really, really compelling stories of people that have been in jail for 20 years, for crimes that they did not commit. That were able to get out because of the Innocence Project and their legal team and the DNA testing that they do on crime scene stuff that proved that it wasn't the person that committed that crime. And so really important stuff. My co-founder, Alicia, my second business is Gift Pact. My co-founder, Alicia, works at the Innocence Project there. And she's the head of digital there and just has done an amazing job in growing digital fundraising, growing the audience there. My role specifically, and my team's role, is to help primarily with paid media support. So we run a lot of the Facebook and Google ads, and we do some growth marketing and SEO and stuff like that here and there. But we're primarily responsible for doing things like growing the email list, running Facebook campaigns, running Google search campaigns, stuff like that. So yeah, it's been great. I mean, I think with the Innocence Project overall, as far as immigrants are concerned, I think a lot of immigrants and people of color are unjustly incarcerated. That there's a lot of prejudice against them. That people make assumptions that they're more likely to be criminals. And so I think the Innocence Project, plays a role. I think the Innocence Project is important to everyone because anyone can be convicted of a crime that they didn't do. Right? Just because you're innocent doesn't mean that you won't end up in jail for something you didn't do. And so even though the Innocence Project is only, I say only, but they've helped hundreds of people get out of prison. It's not about them just, I think, serving those hundreds of people that they got out of prison. It's about them protecting all of us who are innocent and not committing crimes from being put in that position in the first place.
How's your agency helping them communicate that message?
So we're helping them. Basically, we're kind of adding fuel to the fire, I would say. So we're kind of like the team that pours gas on the messaging that they're already doing. So when they're posting things on social media, we're promoting those things to a wider audience. In some cases, 10xing the visibility of social media posts. If they're doing an end of year fund, it was Giving Tuesday last week. So we did a lot of campaigns promoting their Giving Tuesday match campaign. So we're basically like the ones taking a role in amplifying all of the messaging that they do organically. Like that's our role, to be a sort of amplifier.
Okay, very interesting. So let's go back to college. You're in college. What are some of the values as an immigrant student did you find yourself that were uniquely suited to you and that gave you the jolt or somewhat to overcome or to stand out from the crowd of the rest of the students?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I was a first sort of generation college student. My mom went to a 2-year trade school and my dad went to a 2-year community college. So I was the first person in my family, at least amongst, I was the first person in my direct family after my parents to go to a 4-year school. And the first person probably in my whole extended family to go to an Ivy League school. So I think I don't think it really played a major role in terms of how I interacted with everybody day to day. I would say it, definitely felt, I'll say privileged to be there. I think I probably had a greater sense of appreciation for being there, compared to kids that, have had parents that went to Brown or parents that went to other, prestigious schools. So I think, my sense of appreciation and kind of like really at the end of the day, like maximizing the opportunity from a social and educational perspective, was something that I think I successfully did. I don't really look back on college with any regrets. It was like probably pretty easily like the best 4 years of my life. And I think if you ask any of my friends, they'd probably agree. So I think I feel satisfied, I think, about the experience I had there, because I think in the moment I really appreciated it.
That's fantastic. I enjoy college too. But let's jump into cryptocurrency. I always tell people, hey, college was probably my best years. I can't remember half of what happened, but I had a really good time. That I do remember. So with the launch of the gift pack, you've introduced a new dimension into nonprofit fundraising. First, how did you come up with the idea? Two, why was it necessary for nonprofits to get into crypto donations? And three, how are you guys helping them with staying cash flow using cryptocurrencies?
Yeah, so I got into crypto. I messed around with a little bit of crypto in 2017 during one of those first bubble manias. And then in 2020 is when I really revisited it in a serious way. That was sort of during COVID, during the pandemic times, when there was just like a lot of, for me, I came in from a sort of a macroeconomic perspective. You had stimulus checks going out, you had Fed injecting a lot of liquidity into the economy, dropping interest rates to zero. And to me, like, stock market was crashing, like all that stuff. I majored in economics at college, so all that stuff was like super interesting to me. And I was sort of thinking through like, okay, there's a lot of volatility in markets right now. How can I take advantage of this from an investment perspective? I remember the Bitcoin, halving in the 4-year cycle that happened twice before. And to me, Bitcoin sort of just presented itself as like the best investment opportunity. It's sort of like Bitcoin or GameStop, I guess, or AMC, or all that crazy meme stock stuff. So I was like, Bitcoin, there's a strong narrative here. I can see the 4-year cycle emerging. This is what I'm going to this is the horse I'm going to bet on. So from there, I just kind of got sucked into the broader crypto ecosystem. I discovered Ethereum and decentralized finance and NFTs. And I realized that there's a lot going on in crypto under the hood. That wasn't really about financial speculation. It was about building new, just, equitable financial systems that are permissionless in the sense that anyone can access them. And the really compelling part to me is that there's no middleman. People can transact on these networks without a tech company or bank or nation state interfering with their transactions. It's just person to person, with all of the value remaining with the two people and not being sucked away by some third party that's not really providing any additional value. I think the example I like to use a lot is the Apple App Store, is great, but they charge a 30% fee on the apps that are sold in the App Store, which is crazy. Like, if you're an app developer and you sell an app for $1, 30 cents of that goes to Apple, 70% goes to the creator. When you're building apps on crypto networks, 100% of the profits go back to the creator, right? And then the owner of that app then generally the person who's consuming it generally has some sort of proof of ownership. Web3 is often called like the ownership layer of the internet, because you can hold, verifiably scarce assets. Started with Bitcoin, but then moved on to other tokens, and now, NFTs and stuff like that. And so really, like, to me, like, that value accrual to builders and users, as opposed to middlemen and gatekeepers and big tech monopolies, is a very compelling narrative. It's like super capitalistic and super communist at the same time, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Which, like, to me is like very, very interesting. So I just like, got down the crypto rabbit hole and realized with Alicia, my co-founder of the Innocence Project, crypto philanthropy, donating tokens to nonprofits, was exploding. Because from the IRS perspective, if you donate appreciated assets, it's treated the same. If you donate crypto, it's treated the same way as donating property or stock or any other assets like that. So if you bought, Ethereum at $1,000 and you donated it at $2,000, not only do you get a $2,000 tax deduction on your next year's income tax statement, you also avoid paying capital gains on that appreciation. So there's a double tax benefit of donating appreciated assets that you don't get if you just donate cash. So there's strong incentives to donate crypto to nonprofits for that reason. And the average crypto gift to a nonprofit is $10,000 compared to $100 in cash. So we wanted to figure out, how do we help nonprofits? I work with a lot of nonprofits through Blue Wing, my agency. Alicia works at a nonprofit. How do we help nonprofits take advantage of Web3 and crypto and make sure that they don't miss this opportunity? Because nonprofits are typically last to adopt new technologies, and they struggle to do it. And so we really designed the platform with nonprofits in mind. We incorporated our own nonprofit 501c3, and we launched the site in August. And we really have three primary products. Number one is a direct donation website. You can donate crypto to over 500,000 organizations on our website. It's free for the nonprofits to use. They don't have to pay anything up front. They don't have to set up exchange accounts. They don't have to do KYC or AML. They just get cash wired in or sent as a check once a month from us, and we do all the work. We also have support for donor advised funds, which are a really popular philanthropic vehicle. And we also are working on a giving API. So yeah, we're really trying to live at the intersection of wealth management and philanthropy. We want to figure out, how do we put, assets in the fastest growing asset class, which is crypto, to good work. We think crypto is the fastest growing asset class. It is, pretty objectively, in the last 10 to 15 years. And we want to get as much of this asset class in the hands of people doing good work. So
you're the son of an immigrant, and here you are, having created a platform that is benefiting or helping millions of Americans, people across the globe. When you're working with nonprofits, are you specific about how you approach nonprofits that do target immigrants or serve immigrants?
I think from a give back perspective, I'd say we generally treat them the same. We do obviously love working with immigrant focused nonprofits. Alicia is also the daughter of immigrants as well. So we have a strong appreciation for immigrants that are, organizations that are serving immigrants and helping them.
Yes.
I think, one of the things that, crypto excites me about crypto specifically in the context of immigrants is that there's a lot of people working on solutions in crypto that would serve immigrants as, more broadly. So for example, stable coins are getting really popular, and that's going to give immigrants or people around the world globally that are maybe living in countries where inflation is really crazy, to get access to dollars and a stable source of value. And there's people working on solutions for decentralized identity. When you're an immigrant and you go from country A to country B, but they seize your driver's license and passport and any other form of identification, what do you do when you get to the next country? You're kind of screwed. And so to have your identification backed up on a blockchain that no one can destroy or tamper with is very compelling and very useful for people that are refugees and need some sort of identification when they're moving to a new country. So there's a lot of things, whether it's access to financial services or access to identification, that crypto broadly is helping immigrants with. And that really excites me about being in this space.
That is incredible, man. So let's say you in a room, you have about 10, 15, 20 immigrant aspiring investors. How would you speak to them in terms of where they can channel their dollars to benefit other immigrant businesses? What industries specifically are you looking at that you're thinking there's a future here, or this industry is going to blow up?
That's a really good question. In terms of an investment idea?
Yes.
Yeah, I would say, generally speaking, I would start conservatively, and then I would sort of work your way out the risk curve. And so, for example, step one is make sure you have enough dollars saved in your savings account to cover your expenses for 6 months to a year. Make sure you have an emergency savings account. Okay, that box is checked. Step number 2, set up all of your retirement accounts. You have, SDIRA, SEP IRA, Roth IRA, 401k, whatever you can get access to set up, whether that's through an employer or on your own. Set that up and maximize your contributions. A Roth IRA, for example, you can do, I think, up to $6,000 a year. They change it once in a while, up to a certain income limit. So max that out. If you're above that, open a SEP IRA or do a 401k through your employer. Put that all into a conservative basket of like the S&P 500 and like bonds or whatever else. Use a robo-advisor like Wealthfront. Just sort of make sure that you're maximizing your retirement account and with conservative, like sensible investments. Okay, so that box is checked. Now, box number 3, like, let's go a little bit further out the risk curve. You have emergency savings, you're maximizing your retirement accounts. What other investments can you make? Maybe now you want to start looking at like real estate. You may want to buy like a second home that you can rent. You can buy some commercial property. You may want to look at specific stocks. Like maybe you know a lot about food, and there's Chipotle's, I don't know, like whatever you're interested in. Maybe you're a doctor and you know about medical stuff, and like there's some medical stocks that you're bullish on. Like get a little bit more risky, be a little bit more specific. Maybe it's crypto, maybe it's like something like that, and sort of go that one step further out in the risk curve. So I think that's sort of how I think about investing. I think, make sure you have your emergency savings first covered. Number 2, make sure you're maximizing your retirement accounts with some conservative investments. And then if those 2 boxes are checked, then lean into what you know, lean into what you're comfortable with, and start getting more specific, whether that's specific stocks, real estate, crypto, etc. And go from there. And that's what I would say. I would say, I don't think there's any specific industry I would recommend. I think there's investment opportunities in every industry, probably. I think it's more so about like lean into what you know and what you're passionate about, because ultimately that will lead you into finding like the right opportunities that are good for your risk tolerance, and that if you're making risky investments, you want to have conviction in them, right? Like you shouldn't invest in something because I tell you. Like you should invest in something that, like an industry that where you're like, oh, this makes sense to me. Like I have long-term conviction in like what this company is doing, or I know this neighborhood really well, and I think it's gonna do well in the long run, so I'm gonna buy a home here that I can rent. Like whatever it is, like lean into what you know. To me, that's the best way to make an investment decision.
Okay, wonderful. So where can people find you on social media if they were looking for you?
Yeah, so I'm on LinkedIn. If you just search Stephen Aguiar, Stephen Aguiar Gift Pack, or Stephen Aguiar Blue Wing, you should be able to find me. I'm also on Twitter. My Twitter username is @RiceandBeats, OX0X. So that's Rice, letter N, Beats, 0X. Those are the 2 best places to find me, LinkedIn and Twitter. I also post a bunch of crypto stuff on TikTok. Same username, RiceandBeats0X. So those are the 3 best places to find me if you want to follow along. Excellent.
Now let's project you 40, 50 years from today. You're an old man. You've done fantastic in life. What are some of the things you want to look back and be like, dude, man, I killed it. I'm proud of what I've done. What are those things that in your grandpa moment you want to look back and be like, I did that?
Probably mostly that my kids are successful and like well-adjusted and happy. I think the career stuff is great. But I think the cool thing about having kids is that it's like your second and third and fourth, depending on how many kids you have, chance to shape the world. So I think to me, as long as they're happy, I'll be happy.
Have you stopped to think of how AI is going to change their lives?
Yeah, I mean, it's changing our lives already. I mean, my wife is a copywriter, so we already had a lot of conversations about AI and like how it's going to affect her career. And ultimately, she had to make some adjustments to her career planning because of AI, which are all positive, and she's on the right track now. I would say like the same way that sort of Google gave instant access to information to sort of my generation, this is going to just bring it to the whole new level. I think, hopefully AI leads to a world of abundance, and my daughters will live in a world where, the standard of living is really high, and AI and robotics are like just making everyone's lives easier, and then they can focus on things that they're really passionate about. That's my optimistic take. I'm sure I can go down to like the negative path too, and the pessimistic path as well. But I'm going to hope that everything works out, and the AI makes their lives richer and better, because it gives them the opportunity to work on things that they really care about.
Really, that's pretty cool. Thank you. We appreciate you. So if you were speaking to recently moved in immigrants that want to focus to go into college, or two are coming into high school, and now they are excited, they don't know how things work out, but you want to lay grounds for them so that they can be able to kill it, what would you say to them?
Yeah, I would say, again, be open-minded. There's a lot of different paths to success. I think, lean into what you know, follow your curiosity. I think, if you're an immigrant in this country, for me, as far as my values, like I generally just follow my curiosity, and I generally think everything else will fall into place. So whether that was like earlier in my career with like media and publishing, then in the middle of my career with like starting my own digital marketing agency, and then now with crypto, I think I generally just like, when I get into something, I really get into it. And it's whether or not you think it's going to be a career path, like it can be. Like everything can be turned into a career. So just follow what you're interested in, and you'll figure out the money will follow. So that would be my advice. Just follow your curiosity, and everything else should fall into place.
Excellent. Is there anything that's going on with current affairs that you think is a concern for immigrants and they should be tracking it?
I don't think so. In the US specifically?
Across the globe?
Yeah, I mean, there's obviously a lot of geopolitical issues right now, that are concerning. I think, in my opinion, I mean, I don't know, we'll see what sort of happens geopolitically. I think what's gonna probably end up happening, I think, is that reality is gonna set in for a lot of countries like the US and China and Europe and other developed nations, if you want to call it that, that immigrants are gonna be vital for them to maintain their GDP growth and their economic growth, and their general dynamic nature. So I'm very bullish on immigrants. I think that we need them more than ever. You look at the unemployment rate in the United States and the incredible demand for labor. And we're actually pretty good demographically when you compare it to like countries like Europe and China. So I'm incredibly bullish on immigrants and their role in the world. I think immigrants are going to have a lot of opportunities if they want them. So I'd say, like, again, I'm going to take the optimistic side. I think, the pessimistic route, of course, I'm worried about geopolitics and like the crazy amount of refugees that either leaving Ukraine or leaving Palestine or whatever it is. Like, that's really sad. And those people, are going through incredible challenges right now. But I think more broadly and over time, I think immigrants are going to have a lot of options. And I think they're going to really have their pick of the litter when it comes to like where they want to move. Because it's really interesting to me how like overpopulation was the fear like 10, 15 years ago. And now we're all worried about underpopulation. And the only way for like these countries to fill this demographic gap with baby boomers dying off is to bring in a ton of immigrants. So again, I'm generally bullish on the prospects for immigrants moving forward. Although I want to be sensitive and know and aware that there's a lot of refugees and immigrants going through a tough time right now too.
Finally, reflecting on your journey so far, what are your aspirations for the future in terms of supporting immigrant communities and leveraging technology for social good?
Yeah, so we're starting with generally with the nonprofit stuff, again, we want to help 501c3s that serve immigrants basically be more successful in raising funds via crypto, which is the fastest growing emerging asset class. I think I'm going to stay in crypto for the long run. And whatever's after GivePact, I hope that that's, doing something that, again, promotes financial inclusion amongst people that are underbanked or don't have identity and things like that. So I think there's a lot of opportunity in crypto and Web3 to serve the needs of immigrants and people that need access to financial services. So I hope that that's the next chapter of my career.
Steve, you've been amazing. There's so many nuggets in there. I am so glad we had this conversation. I want to thank you for your time, bro. You've been fantastic.
Thanks so much, Martin. It was really a pleasure.
We look forward to speaking soon. Hey, the next time we're in New York, I'm sure we'll touch base, maybe stop and enjoy a cigar or something.
That sounds great.
All right, brother. Take it easy. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.